Hi there, my name is Lindy Ferrero, and I am super excited to be here with Shala Nicely, who is in our community and treats a very specific mental health disorder, which I don't have the specialties with, and she is my go-to professional. And so she has been gracious enough to give me a window of her time because she's very busy to answer questions about obsessive compulsive disorder. But first, can you tell me a little bit about you and why this is your passion?
Sure. So thanks for asking me to do this today, Lindy. I really appreciate it. It's always nice to help spread the word about OCD and its appropriate treatment. So in terms of me, the reason I do this is I actually have OCD. And I developed it probably around age 5 and kept it secret. I had this thing my OCD told me called rule number 1, which is I could not tell anyone what I saw in my head or thought. And so I kept it secret until I was in my mid-20s, and I was in therapy for a totally different issue. And the therapist managed to figure it out from some things that I said that I had OCD, but didn't tell me there was any treatment for it other than medication. And I tried the medication. It didn't work very well. And then I was in and out of therapy for the next probably 13 years and was never given the appropriate treatment for OCD. And so my OCD got worse and worse and worse and worse. And I would always continue to do things that I needed to do. I'd go to work and had relationships, but life was exceptionally challenging because it took everything I had to hold it together. And I did not find out about the right treatment until I decided to go to the International OCD Foundation conference, which I found out about when I was in my late 30s. And I just happened upon them because I decided I wanted to write a book about my experience dealing with OCD. Because even though it was exceptionally challenging, I felt I was managing it okay. And I thought, well, maybe I'll share with people how I'm doing this in case that would help other people.
Right.
And went to this conference, and the very first session on the very first day, the speaker said, well, we all know the gold standard treatment for OCD is ERP, exposure and response prevention therapy. And I had never heard that in over 2 decades of trying to get the right treatment.
So here you are you're in the therapy office, you're trying to get better, you know it's been diagnosed, and yet everybody knows except you don't know. And the therapist that you were working with didn't know.
Right. The many therapists and psychiatrists and other mental health professionals that I saw, nobody told me about exposure and response prevention therapy.
So what is it? I'd love to know more.
So what exposure and response prevention is, it's a type of cognitive behavioral therapy that is the evidence-based treatment for OCD. So there's a huge body of research supporting its work. And we understand a fair deal about how it's helping. We don't know all the details just because, we're still understanding the brain more and more each day, but we know a lot about how it works. And what we do is, with somebody who has obsessive compulsive disorder, they have these intrusive thoughts that typically are very disturbing, very frightening, and they have a compulsive reaction to those thoughts, something to neutralize the thoughts, to make them go away, to make the anxiety that the thoughts create come down. And what happens is that people with OCD can't stop doing these compulsions. And as they do the compulsions reinforce the cycle and make it worse. The intrusive thoughts that people with OCD have are actually no different than the intrusive thoughts that any of us have. Research has been done to show that everybody has these intrusive thoughts. The problem is, in people with OCD, the OCD reacts to the thoughts. So it's not the presence of intrusive thoughts that causes OCD. Otherwise, we'd all have OCD, and that's definitely not true. It's not that everybody has a little OCD, because they definitely don't. Everybody has these intrusive thoughts. People with OCD, the OCD reacts negatively to the thought and says, oh my gosh, why'd you have that thought? That's a horrible thought. Does that mean that's going to happen? Does that mean you're going to do that? Are we a horrible person for having that? And then there's the compulsive behavior that comes after that to try to neutralize that thought. So what we do in exposure therapy is we allow people to be in the presence of these intrusive thoughts, and we teach them how to stop doing the rituals. And the rituals typically are either physical or they're mental. The tough part about OCD is a lot of people do mental rituals, and some people only do mental rituals. So you have to help them learn how to stop doing that. And once you can get people to be in the presence of these thoughts, to stop doing rituals, it actually changes the way people's brain chemistry works. And through that process, the brain learns that these thoughts are not dangerous. And as it learns the thoughts aren't dangerous, it stops putting them in front of people. So this is all based on the theory that OCD is based on an intolerance of uncertainty. So it's not actually about the umpteen types of content that OCD will parade in front of somebody, telling them they've run over somebody, or they're a pedophile, or they're going to stab their mother, all sorts of things that people with OCD might typically experience. It's not about that. It's about the uncertainty, about not knowing whether any of those might happen.
It's the uncertainty. I think that resonates with me, because the very few people that I have been able to spot, okay, this is OCD, it's the fear of this thought, will I do it?
Correct.
And am I going to act on this? And you were so gracious in a clinical moment for me where I didn't know what to do, and I called you up, and you were quick to, like, they're not going to do what they're fearing. They're not going to do that. But it's the anxiety around the unknown. I love that really is helpful. And what I don't like in our community in general is everybody says I've got OCD. So how do you differentiate OCD? I mean, it's impacting your life in a very negative way, these intrusive thoughts, versus I am overly anxious and fearful. Because everybody says they have OCD,
and that is one of the issues that I'm working with a group of people on to try to remedy. Because when people who don't have OCD say, "Oh, I'm a little OCD about that," and there happens to be a person with OCD present, what that says to the person unknowingly with OCD is, "Oh, well, what you have isn't a big deal, and you should just be able to get over it." And so what we hypothesize is that because there's such a groundswell of people saying I'm so OCD, it actually keeps people from seeking treatment, because they think, gosh, if everybody's so OCD, like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just get over this?
Mm-hmm.
And the difference is that when people say I'm so OCD, and I think nobody's saying that as meaning to be mean or demeaning or anything, it's just we don't know. But I think what people are meaning is I'm neat, I'm meticulous, I'm attentive to details. But that is not at all OCD. So if you can think about if you had a gun pressed up here and nobody else can see the gun, but you know the gun's there and you can feel the gun, and you can hear the person holding the gun whispering to you, "You better do what I say. If you don't do what I say, you know what's going to happen. You're going to get hurt. Somebody in your family's going to get hurt. You've got to do this. There's no choice." And so all day long, you sort of walk around with this feeling like your heart is up in your throat, because when you're having an active OCD episode, you're really in the fight or flight response, because your brain does not know the difference between an actual danger and the danger that's been created in your mind. And so you're incredibly frightened all day long. And you're doing these compulsions to reduce the anxiety. And so it just feels incredibly frightening and exhausting, because you can't stop doing these compulsions, because anybody being, held up with a gun would do exactly what the gunman is saying. And that's the way people with OCD feel, is we just do what the OCD is saying because we don't want to take the risk that if we don't, the gun's going to go off.
Yeah.